Ni hao, hola, and privet, fellow unifiers. I wanted to make a video about a concept that I've heard quite a lot about over the last few years, and that's globalization. See, globalization seems to have a lot of misunderstandings around it, especially when I see a lot of protest groups and things like that. Protesting globalization, I tend to get the feeling that perhaps people don't understand quite what it is, or if they do understand what it is, they'll realize that protesting against it really is fairly ineffectual. See, the idea of it seems to get caught up between these conspiracy theories and things of that nature of globalists. And obviously globalists are this idea that people have of this cabal of international businesses and politicians that are all consciously planning to hold the world down and control everything for themselves. See, I'm not saying that there aren't incredibly wealthy people that are trying to do things like that. But the thing is, it's not the gigantic cabal of people that people seem to think that it is. It's not let's interweave government and business together and create this gigantic empire. It's more everyone's out for themselves and trying to do things on their own. Globalization itself is a man-made phenomenon, but not through conscious intent so much as natural effect. It's an unconscious result of conscious effort. I would also venture it's a vital piece of our natural evolution as a species. So I would personally call myself a very enthusiastic globalist by those terms. In a nutshell, globalization is the encompassing of the world by technological forces and cultural amalgamation, essentially. It's the phenomenon created by technology and commerce interweaving over the past 100 years to create a world far less confined and isolated than it has always been historically. It used to be that we were masters of little, and geography and our basic methods of transportation limited us to very small areas, but that's no longer the case. Over all of history, the world has slowly become more and more connected, starting from individual villages and growing out to become networks of villages in a small area. But now, by a new order of magnitude, it's become global rather than regional. That leads to people moving all over, businesses having access to everywhere, instantaneous global communications are widely available, and a general cultural blending is the natural result. We have sushi on the corner, we have Latin American music, North American movies, and mosques next to churches. The lines separating one place from another have rapidly deteriorated. The buildings that historically held businesses, nations, cultures, and peoples apart and separate are dissolving, and the isolationist components of our world have already lost. Our economic, commercial, and political structure appears as a reaction to changing circumstances. And now circumstances have changed again, and nothing will prevent our structures from changing yet again. In fact, change is the one constant we can always depend on. Nothing remains as is, which is a wonderful thing for the evolution of society. So there is no conscious plan behind globalization. It's the unconscious result of technological forces and cultural intermixing that's resulted from it. But of course, not all change is positive for everyone. The negative side effect of this change on human civilization is that vast areas of the developed world have seen money and employment disappear in enormous amounts. The hardest hit are those who provided manufacturing services and expensive local products, who have been replaced readily by not only offshore production, but the vastly more dangerous automation. See, we have the high street shops, we have the factories in places like Michigan in the United States and all over the developed world have been gutted, have been completely gutted of employment. The thing is, these towns became enormous cities where these places are because of the factories that were there, but now the factories have gone and the towns are left with the townspeople being there with no employment. And functionally, the way that should work is that the people will then pack up and go somewhere else. But the thing is, the manufacturing jobs are gone. The manufacturing jobs are gone from the US in massive numbers, and they've gone overseas because offshoring is much cheaper, but also automation is much cheaper, and it is getting cheaper all the time than employing people. There is a great deal of debate about exactly how much of the United States' vast manufacturing employment losses are automation and production. But there is only cursory debate about both of them being an issue, and both are linked to globalization in some way. Offshoring is directly linked to globalization, as access to all markets means that when you're no longer a superior choice, a company will just freely move their production elsewhere. If you cost more, they might as well leave, because a company is primarily beholden to the shareholders' desire for growth. As for automation, here is a quote from a Princeton study. Take the steel industry. It lost 400,000 people, 75% of its workforce, between 1962 and 2005, but its shipments did not decline. According to a study published in the American Economic Review last year, the reason was a new technology called the mini mill. Note, a manufacturing business lost 75% of its workforce. They didn't go overseas, it wasn't offshored, they were just eliminated because of a new piece of technology that came on the market. This is not the danger of offshoring, this is 400,000 people who lost their work because of automation of production. That is new technology, these jobs have vanished. This is going to be a problem not for one country, but for all of them. Increasingly due to global free trade, all businesses will look to automation to maximize their fortunes. The links between business success and the well-being of the common citizen are more tenuous than ever. Globalization is the process of making the entire world one cultural and economic bloc. It's not a conscious process, but it's undeniably real. And short of a massive upheaval of new isolationism, it's not going to stop. This has been a major component of the resurgence of the right wing, a rejection of this mixing of absolutely everything. But it can be seen clearly in the numbers behind the votes. There is a massive generational gap. And while many older generations reject it, many younger ones embrace it. It's simply a matter of time until the globalized youth outnumber the nationalized senior citizens. But why exactly are the youth so much more willing to accept and embrace globalization and the intermixing of the world? The key is the fact that young people have grown up predominantly in cities or urbanized areas, in cosmopolitan environments where people from all different places form newer and a blended society that's slowly replacing the old isolated one. Uniformity has given way to multiculturalism, but that in turn has given way to a new blended culture of its own. Multiculturalism has not proven to be an endpoint. It's a transition stage, a period where different cultures are living amongst each other, sometimes in, not particularly happy circumstances, giving way to a period where a new blended culture appears in the next generation. It's a process that's happened tens of thousands of times throughout history, and it's happening again on a never-before-seen scale. The children of today will have a different culture from what their grandparents experienced, and likely that cycle will repeat itself again with their own grandchildren. Globalization is a blending not only of economics, but of culture. It's a blending of everything. Sooner or later, that's going to need to be total, because inconsistent control over a global society is unsustainable. The answer to what comes next, though, is not a rejection of globalization. It's leaning into it. It's moving with the forces of the world in the way that they're going. The thing is that we have currently a society that is increasingly global, but we have a political system that's not. We have a political system that does not match the businesses within it, or the people within it, or the forces, or the cultural intermixing, or any of these other things. The national political system is increasingly becoming redundant, and it becomes more redundant every single day. So the reality is, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to simply buckle down and try and make the rest of the world become isolated again, become nationalized again? The enormous amount of damage we would have to do to global society and the global economy in order to pull everything back to being nationalized is incomprehensible. The reality is that things are going to keep moving. Things are going to keep moving in that direction, and we need to change the political system to work with the ever-changing society and economics within it, because that is the way forward, and that is the way that we will develop. It's going to take some serious rethinking on our part. A lot of ideas that we have now aren't going to be relevant in the next world, the world we're creating, but I definitely think that we're up for it. I definitely think it's something that we should put our minds to. Globalization is not our enemy, it's just a force. And if you use a force properly, just like capitalism, if you use it properly and you ride it in the right direction then it can be incredible for everyone. Because problems are becoming global problems, whether it's crime, such as terrorism, which has become a global threat. Terrorist groups don't respect national borders. Whether it comes down to financial markets, global financial crises are now global financial crises. You don't have a national market going down, you have the global market going down, as you could see very clearly in 2008, because everyone's invested into everyone else. And then finally, obviously, the most obvious example is global warming. All the countries need to coordinate to come up with an answer to this, but as can clearly be seen, it's hell trying to organize a global community into doing a solid plan when they have all these different elections at all these different times and all these different priorities, and one country thinks you can get away with not committing while the other ones do and get an advantage, and it's a horrible situation. And we have global problems now that need global solutions. And the only solution to that is to globalize entirely. Anyway, thanks very much. I'll see you later, Unifiers.